I'm Astrid. I run the network underpinning the program. And it's my pleasure today to launch the third edition of the AI for Services report. Since 2018, we've championed innovation in the professional and financial services sector, and we've witnessed how digital transformation first implicated early adopting firms and tech enthusiasts to now becoming a necessity for all firms of all sizes. So in 2020, we launched our first report, which looked inevitably at the impact of the pandemic. And it was a reminder that change is possible when the need is there. And then in 2022, we explored the international market, benchmarking UK capabilities with global players. And this year, we have mapped future innovation opportunities across all subsectors, and also looking at regional strength beyond London. We've also included a chapter looking at the investment landscape that will be useful to those in the room looking for investment. So it's been a pleasure working with Whitecap Consulting on this, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the team for their in-depth work. And I would like to welcome Julian and Michael to the stage. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much, Astrid. And thanks, Stephen and Lee, as well, for the opening 2 slots. My name's Julian Wells. I'm Director at Whitecap Consulting, and my colleague, Michael Fletcher, is going to be jointly delivering this part of the session with me. It's been our pleasure to work alongside Astrid and Stephen and the rest of the Innovate UK team over recent months to produce this report. What we will do in the next 20-25 minutes or so is to just talk you through what have we done over recent months. So how did the project work? What did we find? And essentially, what does it mean and what should happen next? In terms of the process, we've conducted a fairly extensive exercise over the last, we actually started this towards the end of last summer, and during that time we consulted pretty widely across the financial professional services sector, and this slide kind of summarises what we've done, but we've engaged with the ecosystem on an individual and a group basis. We ran a number of group sessions both at the start and later on in the project. We commissioned an online survey of 300 people working across the professional and financial services sector. And then there's obviously a lot of research and insight and data that's already been published around professional and financial services. And so we've been over that and drawn out the things that are most relevant to this report. Now, on the right-hand side of this slide, you can kind of see the scope of the work that we did. So we considered professional and financial services to be broken down into 3 core areas: financial services and insurance, accounting, and legal. And when we did the research, say the group discussions, the one-to-one discussions, and also the online survey, what we made sure is that we had a very balanced input across those areas. So in that survey of 300 people, there were 100 from financial and services and insurance, there were 100 from accounting, and there were 100 from legal. So as Stephen's slide showed earlier, there's a large split towards the financial services and insurance sector when you look at professional and financial services, but we tried to balance the findings as best we could. There's some emerging tech areas that we had to pay particular attention to: fintech, legal tech, and insurtech. And obviously, as you look forward at innovation opportunities, then those areas inevitably come to the fore, and a lot of the things that Lee talked about also become very hot topics across each of those areas. And then the final thing to say is regional balance. So just as we had a split across the sectors in our research sample, we did exactly the same in terms of the regional representation. So many people in this room were part of the consultations to this project, and we're really grateful for your time and input. But equally, there's a much wider ecosystem across the UK, and we split things out into 6 key regions, which you can see on the screen there. And I didn't really introduce Whitecap at the start, but we're a strategy consulting company. We have a regional focus in much of the work that we do. We're not London-based. We work across financial and professional services as the biggest sector that we work in. We work in other areas as well, including education. But we're particularly immersed in the regional side of fintech and legal tech, and involved in regional fintech and legal tech ecosystems. So we appreciate firsthand how important it is to have that regional lens on a piece of work like this. So in terms of the, what does this sector look like, and to bring that regional focus to life a bit in a visual sense, we broke down using data that's derived from the ONS, the overall professional and financial services sector, and then also financial services, insurance, legal and accounting. And we looked at the jobs and the GVA, the productivity of these sectors, and the number of organisations. And you can see that there's a, if you sort of start at the bottom there of the financial services side, you can see the reflection of the stats that Stephen showed earlier about the projects that have been undertaken in this space. It is skewed towards financial services and insurance, but all of these are very important and very meaningful sectors for the UK economy. And in the industrial strategy, the 8 high growth sectors that have been identified, professional and business services is one of them, and digital, importantly, is another, and financial services is another. So 3 of the 8 are within scope of this work. And if you look on the right-hand side, I'm not going to go through all the different regions, but I think what the numbers there show is that this is truly a nationally distributed sector across the UK. Every one of those 6 regions that we've looked at has a very significant professional and financial services sector. The jobs are really important to those regions, and the organisations there are also important. And so it's no surprise that when you spend time in those regions that you find that inward investment, job creation and growth are areas of focus for sort of local government and other organisations. So at this point I'm going to hand over to Michael to talk you through some of the more detailed areas of the findings.
Morning all, thanks for being here and for allowing me to come and speak on stage. I'm definitely a happy representative of the children in suits, as Lee put it, and was heavily involved in the work that Julian's just introduced, and I'll spend a bit of time talking about the key findings and some of the headlines, and appreciate that some of this stuff many of you may know, some might be new, and lots of it will be talked about later on today, so I'll try and get through it relatively quickly and talk about stuff that you might not hear so much about today. So following Lee's really interesting introduction about AI, I'm finding it quite difficult to do what I said I was going to do, which is zoom out. This report is all about zooming out from our normal day-to-day, the trends that we see almost all the time, and all the complexities that live in there. And if you do that and wipe away all the clouds, this sector is really vibrant, highly diverse, and really impactful. As a way of us trying to decode what all of that means in a way that everyone can understand, we've used a couple of different lenses through the course of the report to examine some of the key trends, both for transformation over the past 3 to 5 years and for the expected transformations that are to come over the next 5. So included in those, we talk a lot about market drivers, particularly changing customer behaviour. We talk a lot about technology, as you might imagine, for a report focused on digital technology and innovation. We spend a little bit of time talking about regulation, both to highlight the common frustrations, but also the necessity that metric or that lever plays in these markets. We also talk about competitive dynamics, so we talk about different organisational size, so incumbents, SMEs, startups and scale-ups with all their varying challenges and also key things on their agendas. And we also spend a lot of time talking about industry impact, both across economic, social and environmental lenses. So what I'll do for the next couple of minutes is talk you through some of the stats from our survey and from our research that really stood out to us as meaningful to call out. for the sector as a whole. So the first one is just how important digital technology is for these sectors, which will come as, I'm sure... Everything okay over there? Which I'm sure will come as absolutely no surprise to those in the room, as I'm aware that lots of you are representative technology businesses. So the first is that adoption of digital technology is expected to be critically important for the UK to remain as a leader in services, and also critically important for firms to remain competitive in the medium and long term. Just to go back to Julian's point about representation of sample, that's not all driven by technology businesses telling you that their technology is really important. That's a balanced sample. And in fact, we're overweight in PFS organisations who don't sell technology. Similarly, over the next 5 years, those that we spoke to expect a significant acceleration in both the adoption of digital technology in their businesses, but also in the investment, both internally and externally from private and public sources over the next 5 years. Again, bringing together that key theme that digital technology is not only really important today for the UK and for organisations, but is expected to continue to be critical over the next 5 years. Finally, we talk a lot about impact as part of our report, and I just wanted to introduce this stat as well, where 63% of the PFS organisations that we spoke to suggested that the sector has improved its economic impact over the last 3 to 5 years. And it's worth me noting, and I know there's not a stat on this slide, we spend a lot of time in the report talking about social and environmental impact, and the broad majority of people that we talked to suggested that there have been positive steps made in each of those camps, but we're absolutely clear that there's more work to be done over the next 3 to 5 years. Taking a bit of a deeper dive into some of the technology trends that really stood out to us. Again, we've assessed all of those part of that wheel map I introduced earlier on. But technology stood out to us in almost every conversation and almost every answer to the survey that we had. So we spend a lot of time in the report talking about those, both through the transformation that they've generated for the past 3 to 5 years, but again, what that could mean for the next 5 years. So by no means is that an exhaustive list. I think I could spend the rest of the day talking through the long list of technologies that are relevant to this sector. But those on the right were the 4 that stood out most commonly and most impactfully. And those on the left in grey were some of the others that were talked about, though with significantly less frequency or with less impact. And with all these things, it depends who you are, where in the industry you live, what you do. Some of those on the left will be critically important, some of those not on the list will be important, but for the vast majority of those that we spoke to, those on the right were the key. So I'll talk a little bit about those now. So cybersecurity is really all about concern, both from Lee's introduction about AI, and I'm sure everything you've heard about blockchain, quantum computing, any of the emerging and advanced technologies. Key stakeholders in this sector, particularly those who are thinking about bringing technology into their business, are naturally deeply concerned about what this means from a security standpoint. And we understand that, and the key messaging that a lot of those people talk about is if someone can make me feel safe from a cybersecurity perspective, that's a massive thumbs up in their book. Similarly, AI, I won't spend too much time because I'll only dilute what Lee's told us about it, but it's definitely on everyone's radar. Cutting through some of the noise, there's clearly something there, both active today and that can revolutionise the way that these sectors work over the next 3 to 5 years or 10 and plus. Data and data analytics. Data analytics has been around for a very long time, but the key point for us was that it acts both as one of the most prevalent barriers to adoption, as it is one of the most biggest success criteria for doing digital adoption well. Often found in the legal services and accountancy space too, where you've got lots of data in various formats in different places in your business, and trying to tie those together is one, particularly difficult. 2, stops you from doing anything meaningful from an organisation-wide perspective from technology. It can be a real challenge. Finally, another one that's been around for a long time, cloud computing. Whilst the cloud computing sphere has got a very well-defined and established base in what it does, so SAS, IaaS, PaaSes, and all the other ASes that you can find an acronym for, they'll continue to play a part in the future. Though what we did notice is a lot of the emerging technologies, that, for example, AI, for example, blockchain, for example, quantum computing, there's a established belief that cloud providers will be the people kind of leading the charge on that, which doesn't necessarily mean they'll be making the tools themselves. It's really that they've become the platform for bolting in technologies for businesses in a safe, remote and secure way. So they'll continue to be probably not the spear tip, but the wooden thing that keeps it all together as you go through the future. We'll spend a bit of time talking about investment in the sector. So we spent a lot of time looking into private capital in particular, so private investment from a bit of a mixture of private equity firms, corporate funders, and VCs and angels. And just to put some numbers on the screen, clearly, if you add all those up, there's something like 39 or 40 billion worth of private money going into these sectors over the past 3 to 5 years. Clearly a significant amount of money, and clearly over a significant number of deals. And I know the earlier stats that we talked through quite clearly showed that financial services and insurance is one of the largest sectors. It's quite clear that they over-index in investment. And fintech and insurtech play a massive role in that. I think our numbers looked at about 75% of all of that 36 billion is into technology businesses serving these sectors. So clearly appetite. I'll try and do this relatively quickly, but what we were trying to do as part of this, as it's a lens that not everyone has the opportunity to look at, is look at this sector through the eyes of an investor. Why invest? In what would you invest? What's the landscape that you as the investor fit in? What are the concerns that you have? And what are the things on your radar that you want a prospective investment to be telling you so it makes you comfortable that that thing will come off in the way you want it to? So there's a really interesting macro story that's gone on over the past couple of years, and unsurprisingly, much like the PFS sector, investors have lived through a very volatile, uncertain period of time for the past 3 to 5 years, driven by all the same reasons that we all know. So COVID, inflation, interest rates have all been a real challenge for investors into this space. Whilst this is slightly overgeneralized, it is a story that we've heard quite frequently. So the immediate impact from the pandemic during 2020 basically halted deal flow. A lot of concern about future prospects for businesses, no real idea about how a business might perform in the next 12 to 24 months. Lots of investors were particularly concerned about that. Deal flow almost disappeared, or at least that's how it felt. Lots of the data says that there were still deals going through during that time, but that's how it felt. In 2021 and 2022, where the future of the sector and the future of all sectors everywhere started to look a little bit brighter as pandemic and the concern about that started to simmer. There are a lot more deals going through. So what interesting, so I'm relatively new to this, so if you don't know this, nearly all investment houses manage funds with clear contracts about when they need to deploy that capital. If you lose a year of time to deploy that capital, it becomes a much greater rush to get that capital deployed. And in 2021 and 2022, that's exactly what happened. There was a huge rush to get capital deployed into the market. There was lots of competition over high-quality deals, and that skyrocketed typical valuations to the point where I think pre-pandemic, and it's about that level now, you're looking at kind of 4 to 5 times revenue as a valuation for a typical PFS business. It was up to 15 to 20 times. It just shows how much more you're paying for a deal. So as that started to simmer, you've now got founders who expect that type of multiple today, which is creating a lot of negotiation problems, and also trying to shift deals that you've generated during that period is really challenging, and it's fearful that lots of investors will be making losses on deals generated during that period. So that's a little bit about the macro story. It's clear that investors are keen to invest in the professional and financial services sector. Not many investors invest only in that sector. They're often sector agnostic, but it's clearly an area that they're interested in, particularly from a technology side. What we've observed is that there's largely a return to the norm. So if you were raising funding in 2018, 2017, lots of the generic rules applied, but if you're trying to do that over the past 2 or 3 years, you're really living through an abnormal time, through high valuations, lots of negotiation, slightly clunky deals with lots of strange negotiation terms in there. Now it's much more a return to the norm. So, for example, for small to mid-sized private equity businesses, much more focused on capital efficiency, much more a focus on clear exit horizon, much more of a focus on a clear track record for the business. For angels and VCs, so on the earlier stage, you're seeing lots more collaboration, which serves a couple of purposes, which are particularly interesting. So one is as a way of bridging into different regions. So I'll talk about the regional focus in a little bit. But there's clearly an appetite for investors to look to broaden their horizons for investment targets beyond their typical regions. And that's really clear to us in the regions outside of London. It might well be that that's happening in London too. The second thing is to improve the service offering that they provide to businesses. Lots of early stage investors make a point about saying that we add value to the businesses we invest in. Lots of it's door opening, lots of it's advisory, and it's all valuable. So the larger the panel of investors with different skill sets, you're seeing a lot more co-investment happening, which means if you're the individual going through a fundraise, you haven't got one person with a certain skill set willing to help you out and kind of standing with you for your growth journey. You've got 3 or 4 with different skill sets. So you've got a much broader support offering to draw on. And that works both for angel syndicates are an example of that, but you can find the same thing in some select VCs too. A little bit about the regional focus. As is no surprise to anyone, London still leads, both in value and in proportion of investment into this space, but you are seeing a significant increase in regional funding available. And part of that's been driven by public money, so more control over where investment is allocated as part of the regions. You're seeing that also in private capital, so investors looking beyond London to surface for businesses that look attractive. And whilst it's not the right place in here to talk about this, it was something that came out quite strongly for us, was the focus on female founders, both as a challenge for them trying to seek funding, with a bit of a mixture of a really positive story, talking about the efforts that have been made, and again, a call for action for future efforts, both in dedicated funds, in networks, and in sort of direct advisory support. So, that was part of the investment landscape. I suspect I'll shut up now and pass back over to Julian, but thank you very much for listening, and look forward to speaking to as many of you as I can do later on.
Thanks, Michael. And I'll just provide some summary points and point towards some of the actions that are suggested by the report as well. So I kind of made a reasonably big thing earlier about this being a national sector, and that's a theme that you'll find as you go through this report. We've kind of identified that there's a lot of regional ecosystems that are developing. There are more coming into play. And that's an important dynamic as we look to grow this market and sort of build on the UK's national strength and international competitiveness. We look at incubators and accelerators and acknowledge the role that they can play in helping to develop the sector. And I know a lot of the people that are here today are from sort of smaller, high-growth businesses, and those kind of support programs have been proven to help improve the growth trajectory of businesses, and we've done some research that proves that in the fintech space. And then finally, we look at universities and spin-outs, and spin-outs are much talked about in the UK, but if you look at professional and financial services, they're few and far between, and the spin-outs do tend to focus more on the sort of more scientific side of the world. There's clearly an opportunity for universities to help develop more of these businesses, but it's a slightly more bespoke ask. Financial and professional services, founders tend to be quite knowledgeable and experienced in the sector. It's not the sort of the majority route for people that are just coming straight through from the academic background. So we talk about that in the report. And then we also kind of look at where some of the areas for action are, and I'm just going to sort of very, very lightly touch on some of these because some have been covered by Michael. Lee's session has actually provided a really great insight into quite a few of these areas. Data, I mean, when on one of Lee's slides had data right at the very heart, it kind of had several layers on it, and that's what we found. And although cybersecurity came out top in terms of the stats that Michael shared from the survey. Actually, when we talked to people, challenges with data were at the heart of everything, and that links to cyber, and that links to AI, and it kind of links to cloud as well. There's lots of challenges around AI, around ethics. The sort of looming threat of quantum computing has it has lots of opportunities and lots of things that people are worried about the sort of power that that's going to bring. There's a skills angle here. Again, it was kind of come up, I think Stephen touched on it as well, and Lee, that it's not just about the tech, it's about the capability to use the tech and to drive efficiencies and benefit through that. We've just talked about the regional side of things quite a bit, so I won't say any more about that. There's a lot of, I guess there's a lot of resources that we can leverage to grow this sector. There are, as you're going to hear today, and I'm going to introduce Martin in a second, there's two accelerators that Innovate UK are funding around the professional services space and the financial services space. How those accelerators sort of support the sector is going to be really a really kind of great benchmark for what else we might need to do in future. So I'm going to just kind of put us onto this final slide. So this report it launches today. Innovate UK will kind of take the lead in publishing it. I'm sure you'll all get emailed it. It's going to be on the Innovate UK website. There's going to be PR activity from tomorrow. So yeah, that QR code will take you there to the final version, Lee. As you can imagine, there's quite a lot of work. We think we got it down to 80 pages in the end. The target was 60. I think our first condensed draft was something like 130. So there was an awful lot to cover. It's a very, very broad sector. And finally, just want to mention that Whitecap's continuing to work with the Innovate UK team to sort of develop a set of 3 practical guides to help people that are involved in the professional and financial services sector to understand and explore and ultimately kind of adopt and benefit from digital capability, AI, and responsible innovation. And we're in a kind of consultation phase at the moment where we're talking to people to try and gather really sort of practical tips and insights that can be shared within these guides in the form of quotes and resources. So if those 3 topics sound like areas that are particularly relevant to you and you'd like to have some input, then please come and talk to myself or Michael. We'll be here all day throughout the event. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you find the report useful and valuable. If you have any questions about it, our contact details are easy to find. And I'm now going to hand over to Martin Spring, who on behalf of the TIPS Accelerator is going to chair a panel, and we're going to delve a bit more deeply into some of the things that we've already been talking about. So thank you for your time.